So, the title of this conversation is Becoming Who You Always Are. And if you're paying attention to how that is written, it's basically saying are is present tense. Becoming usually denotes that you're coming from one place and then evolving into something else or changing into something else over time. So to use this kind of gerund of becoming and then adding R, it kind of collapses time, if you will. Hey, what's up, notes? So, what I mean by becoming what you always are. So last night I had this nightmare, and all of my life I've had very deep, intense dreams. Sometimes they're like super awesome. I can fly and all kinds of stuff, dreams. And sometimes I have these like nightmares, which I had a nightmare last week and other things. But I've come to the point where I see these dreams as my subconscious mind kind of doing some work while I'm asleep to help me pay attention to things so that when I wake up, I'm that much more clear on the trajectory of my life and the way that I want to go. So last night, I had this nightmare that I was still married to one of my exes, which is funny. But I've had nightmares like that before. And sometimes in those nightmares, I remember my life now inside the dream. And I'll say, hold up, what happened to my wife or what happened to my kids or whatever the case may be. And so last night, I won't get into the details of the dream. Just needless to say, the person that I was in the dream with my ex was a person I would not like today. I was like, this guy sucks. And it was myself, but I could not stand who I was in that relationship, in that dream. And I, in the dream, screamed, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And I got this sense that if I was very present with that reality and that I just like straight up deleted that possibility, it would go away. And so I deleted that possibility in my dream and then woke up and I was in the bed next to my wife that I'm with now. And I thought about that and I said, wow, I wonder if that was one of the versions of my life that I could have had. And there was an experience that my ex and I had that I wished never happened. I don't feel ready to go into it in this conversation, but needless to say, in the dream, that event that precipitated our breakup never happened. And so we stayed together and it was worse. And so I said, wow, this sucks. But what I woke up with was this awareness that the person that I am now is the person that I've always wanted to be, and it's the person that I've always been ever since I was a child. But sometimes we go through these experiences in life that kind of give us permission to be who we already are. Sometimes we find permission to be who we already are because of some kind of negative experience, like what happened in the relationship with my ex or my brother passing or different situations of growing up. And I can kind of create a narrative of how I became this way. But the truth is, I've always been this way. I've just had experiences that kind of unlocked parts of myself, things that put up this wall and I said, enough and no more. Like, for example, the piece that I just wrote called Grieving My Religion Part Two is something that took a lot of years for me to kind of create. And I actually wrote Grieving My Religion Part One last May and started writing Grieving My Religion Part Two the next day. And it took all the way from May till a couple of days ago for me to produce that piece because there were certain events that needed to happen that pushed me to the edge where I was able to write and kind of verbalize some of the things that I wrote in that piece. But before that, I could have, but I didn't because I needed, at least subconsciously, some kind of permission structure. And some of the permission structure, unfortunately, was my brother dying and some of the things that I heard from people from my former evangelical worldview folks say some stuff that I said, good Lord, I'm done with these fools. And so that's what it took. I wish it didn't take that, but it did take that. But at the same time, the person that emerged through that writing has always been me. I've always been open-minded. I've always believed that we have been created in how we want to use that word, in consciousness, in a way that we can live fully awakened, realized beings, liberated beings, regardless of what history tells us, regardless of what our family tells us, regardless of what systems tell us, that we are deeply in alignment with the reality of whatever we think God is. And so I've felt that ever since I was a little kid, but I have never been in many places where I could talk about that openly without people bringing up some old time religion stuff or some fear, some superstition, or one of those kinds of things. And so I've always been trying to figure out how to articulate it. And as I've gotten older, and some things that come with getting older is not giving a crap. And I never really did give a crap, but I also was trying to be respectful of where other people were. But now, the climate that we're in as a society, I've seen so many people that come from the traditions that I was exposed to as a child who have shown their asses in such a way that I can't sit there and just like respect something like what they're putting out there. So then, of course, I'm going to be able to now say things on the other end of the spectrum because the context is such that I can say what I already was thinking. So, hence becoming who you always are. But it's not just on a surface level from a narrative perspective, being able to live into the reality of who we are. There's also a deeper knowing of who we are. And I think that most of us suspect that there's something greater to us than we've been taught. Most of us suspect that we are worthy of the love that we sometimes have not experienced in this life. And I'll point out to you how I know that. So I was telling, I think it was my wife or somebody a couple of days ago, how you can't be upset for a person not showing you love unless you know what it feels like to be shown love. Somewhere inside of you, you have to know what it's like to be worthy of love. And then when somebody doesn't give you what you inherently know you're worth, then you get disappointed. But you're only disappointed because you know better somehow. Somehow, in a way that you might not be able to articulate, express, or remember, there is an awareness that you are worthy of love. Even very, very shitty people, which there are many, don't like the thought of being seen as a shitty person because they know what a better person is, and they know that that better person is within them somewhere, that there's a possibility for them to become that better person, whether they're practicing or not. They know it's in there. That's why when somebody tells them, look at your behavior, look at how you're acting, you're not great, they feel some kind of way. It's because they inside of themselves know what a better person would do, what a cooler person would do, what a more conscious person would do. A lot of times when I'm acting out into the world, I'll ask myself questions that then inform how I show up. So I'll ask myself, what would a conscious person do right now? What would love do right now? What would an awakened person do right now? Or is the old school thing, what would Jesus do? Which I'm still rocking a WWJD bracelet. Is those kinds of questions invite us into the possibility, not of just becoming what we can be, but becoming what we already essentially are. I've met a lot of kids. I'm like, and I never met a kid. It's a rare time you meet a kid that they came in the world and they were just suck. Usually they come in innocent, full of wonder. And there's a reason why the teaching of Christ said to be like a little child. There's a way of being in the world that we come into this experience with. It's inherent. And then it gets covered over in lies and ego and self protection and all these other things. And then we forget who we are. Well, I'm on a journey of remembering. And part of remembering sometimes means looking back and seeing how you got lost, retracing your steps, knowing that if you're not where you want to be, somewhere you made a wrong turn, go back to finding that place where you made that wrong turn and then make a new turn or a U turn. And that's where I am most of my life. One of the gifts of the grief that I'm experiencing right now is I'm basically, in so many ways, reliving a lot of my life through the lens of grief because I learned at an early age that my feelings were inconvenient. So I used to push them off to the side and I would ignore things that could have been sad or grief. I only gave myself a little piece of it and then I just kept going. But as I revisit some of those things, I'm feeling pain that I probably could have felt 15, 20 years ago, maybe being with my ex. Oh my God, that nightmare was terrible. Anyway, but I'm even revisiting some of those things and then allowing them to do their work in me and then shifting the person that I am in this moment. And even back in those times, if you're using linearity to kind of create a historic trajectory, then I was those people. I just did not allow the grief to shape me in the ways that they could have. And now that I've gotten to this place in my maturity and I'm able to take the lens of grief that I picked up from my brother's passing and revisit experiences with my parents, experiences with my brother, experiences with my neighborhood, my jobs, things that I could have really let hurt me that I never did back then. I'm actually letting them hurt me now and then asking myself, like, what do I get from that? What do I learn from that? How can I grow with that? And then I'm shifting in the present moment. And it's actually collapsing time and helping me to accelerate the becoming that I always have been, if that makes sense. It's kind of like a lot of all over the place language. And since we don't have direct feedback, I don't know if it makes sense, but it makes sense to me. So, my invitation to you is for you to ask yourself some questions. Maybe ask yourself, who would you be if you didn't have this negative experience that maybe took you in the dark place? Or who would you be if you had a better experience? Because we know in here, or maybe it's out here, whatever we know. So, asking ourselves some questions that will deliberately and intentionally call to our conscious awareness ways that we could have been, and then choose the preferable ways. Choose the ways, like in my dream last night, I was a weakling, bro. I couldn't stand myself because I was still with my ex, and she was holding my like love for my child against me, and then I was being like a cowardly person because I didn't want us to break up because I wanted to have a whole family, which when I was a kid, when my parents broke up, I wanted them to have a whole family. So in my dream, my ex and I had a kid, which in real life we don't. But in my dream, we did have a kid. And because I didn't want to leave the kid, I stayed in a relationship with her. And then we had a terrible relationship, like very terrible relationship. And I was like suffering terribly in this dream. Thank heavenly whatever that was not real life. But you see what I mean? Like there's certain experiences that can happen that can shape you, but you can witness it and and look at it in a new way and then change now. There's so many people right now that are stuck in all these loops and all these like old ways of being, these tired ways of expressing themselves. And we feel like we can't change unless somebody else changes or somebody apologizes or forgives us. But we have everything we need within us to reimagine our lives moment by moment and to live a life that more closely mirrors who you always are, who you've always been, which is a glorious, radiant child of creation. You might not get told that enough, but truthfully, I'm telling you, I believe that all things are connected, period. Doesn't matter what it is, all things are connected. And so if we're able to draw from the intelligence of everything that's connected, we as individuals become individual expressions of the fullness of all of life. Now, I don't know if that makes sense, but let's just use a computer as an example. Your computer has access to the internet, or I'm assuming it does. So if you have access to the internet in your computer, then you can look up almost anything, get access to the things that you choose with your conscious mind to look up and make better decisions, learn new things. You have access to not all the world's knowledge, but a buttload of the world's knowledge at your fingertips, and you can use it in real time. You can integrate the information that you pick up from this world wide web and integrate that into your life and make decisions from that awareness. If you're willing to put in the work and look stuff up and figure things out, then you can do that. Now, if you use your awareness and the internet to only look up something stupid that you're just going to look up all the time and keep your brain trapped in a silo of limited information when you have exposure to the entire known world almost, and you don't try to explore more than what your little silo life has given you, then you're wasting your access to that technology. The same is true for yourself. Yourself, your consciousness is the most highest, supremest technology on the earth that through which you can access this other information and learn things and do amazing things and be curious about stuff. We all can do it. We all have access to it. Most of us are just lazy as F, and we keep repeating the same habits and patterns even when we get new technology, or because we have connections to people who don't want to grow or don't want to expand. And we feel like if we grow and expand, then somehow we're damaging the relationship. It's not true. It's a lie, but we believe it. But we don't have to do that. And the same is with this mind, man. through stillness and meditation, prayer, reflection, reading, learning, trying to integrate what you read and learn, you can change your life in an instant. Always, 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 you can change your life at any point in time. And it's just a decision away. And it's just allowing yourself to experience yourself in a new way, experiencing yourself as connected to everything, and to use that information to embody a whole new way of being. And it's literally, you can use, like I said, you can use your phone as a metaphor, your computer, whatever the case may be, because we all have access to this knowledge. But with or without access to that knowledge, you have access to the world around you. You can look at nature and see how nature works and integrate how nature works into the way you show up into the world. You can look at your children. You can look at animals. I mean, there's so many things. There's so much here that we have access to through consciousness that we could reshape our lives, shape our lives, remold our lives. We just don't know it because we don't put in the effort. We don't try. And a lot of times it's because of some crap that happened a long time ago that we can't let go of. So, that being said, my friends, becoming who you always are is as simple as a decision that you can make right now. I am making that decision. I have made that decision. It's the only decision I ever could have made, and it's the decision that I have made, and I'm sharing it with you. And I welcome you on this journey. It's going to mean sometimes letting go of things that you might have been holding on to for a long time. That's why I'm openly grieving my religion, because as much as I learned from Christianity, and I super, super still am into Jesus and will never stop being into Jesus, I'm not into Christians, or at least the kind of Christians that come out here supporting some crazy crap. So my attachment, which I had to the word and label Christian, and the belief that if I didn't say the word Christian, then somehow I wasn't following Christ or wasn't in a relationship with Christ, that was stupid. So I'm in the process. I haven't 100% let it go. I could let it go now, but I'm still learning from the attachment. I'm learning of, why was I connected? Why wouldn't I let this go? Why? But that's just for my edification, so that when I'm done, I will have learned as much as I could have learned, both from the good and from the bad. And we all have access to that. So at any rate, I probably said enough. I appreciate you, Notes, for being here. Notes from the Dragon's Nest. Maybe we can do a live one of these days. I'm going to try to do more lives with other people and other folks who check this out later. I look forward to being on this journey with you. Or if how I am does not go with what you want to do with your life, or how you want to be, or who you're in the process of becoming, then I wish you well on your journey. Peace to all of y'all, and have a great day.